My friends, Champagne Friday again. Fantastic to be here in our office doing champagne hikings in a beautiful spot in the center of Stockholm, one of those beautiful streets outside, but I can look and you stay put where you are. What have I picked today? Two brands, two of the most wonderful historic names, but not so famous. Heidsieck Monopole. What is Heidsieck Monopole? I'll tell you a little bit more about that later, but Josephe Perrier, also a mystery. What should I say now? I go back. Those two are fantastic from different reasons, but historically from what I tasted, especially I've tasted some gorgeous Diamant Bleu bottles, the Cuvée Prestige from Heidsieck Monopole, and even the regular vintage with some age is so beautiful. Today it's under the wings of Vranken Group, under the wings of Pommery, and most of the high quality wines are going directly into Pommery. So it's not exactly what it used to be, but if you find some older bottles of Heidsieck Monopole, it's among the best champagnes you can taste. The aftertaste of the Diamant Bleu is the purest example of Versenay, for instance, just to pick a point why you should try to find it. Josephe Perrier is interesting because it's the only champagne house which is not based in Marne among the great ones. They stayed at the place where, for instance, Jackson was created. Chalon-sur-Marne was called. Chalons-en-Champagne, the same place. It's rather far away. It's 40 minutes drive from Reims, and it's not connected to any of the vineyards where Champagne is, but they are so strong locally. So every person who comes to that village, that small city, I should say, can't miss Josephe Perrier. And it's one of the three Perriers, Perrier Chouette, Laurent Perrier, and Josephe Perrier, all linked together from the beginning, but today they stand very clearly for themselves. And actually, in some way, I don't know if it's connected to the fact that they're coming from that they're situated in another city or where they brought their grapes, but definitely they kept their style. And it's quite different from all the other major brands, which is, for me, something very positive. What do we have here? This is a story by itself. Not this wine, but if you read the label, it says Heidsieck & Company, edition Jönköping. That's the way you should pronounce Jönköping, which I heard before in American mouths. It's the ship that was found in the Baltic, not the most recent one where I was very much connected from the bottles from Juglar and Veuve Clicquot, and also a few bottles from Heidsieck Monopole. But the previous story, the first one that was found in the Baltics, the 1907 Heidsieck Monopole. Those bottles were amazingly fresh in the same way as the second ship that was found, and there was a lot of fights and a lot of mistakes done because the Russians wanted it, the Finnish people wanted it, and the Swedish found it. And no one could really understand or decide what was the truth, who really owned them. But what you probably have read from my books and stories, because this was quite famous when it happened, was that all bottles were brought up, and at the beginning they were so fresh, so beautiful, and I actually had the rare privilege of tasting the regular 1907 from the perfect cellars in Reims and compare to the one that was kept on the bottom of the sea in the Baltics. And the sea stored one was so much fresher, so much younger, and simply put, better. Which is something I always speak about when I speak about aging champagne. What's the temperature? What should you have in your own cellar? The simple fact is that the lower you have it, the longer time it takes, and the final result will become even better. But will you like to age your champagne 100 years? Do you want your grandchildren drink it, or do you want to drink it yourself? That's the question you need to ask yourself before you decide the temperature of the cellar. Most important thing, dark, lying down, and deciding approximately when you want to drink it. This is the name, Jönköping. Unfortunately, most people will think that there are a couple of drops of this 1907 because there are still some bottles left and they could have been brought into the dosage or something like that. That's not the case. It's a regular blend from the house, quite low priced, but they're using the name. And time to taste. Since I tasted the 1907 a couple of times, I don't see any similarities. It's a very flattering, broad, public type of champagne. This is very sweet on the nose, a lot of nice caramel notes, which I think will be the beginner's paradise in some way. The champagne connoisseurs will go, this is too much of things that is not classic. That's my first reaction. A lot of red berries, caramel. Nice balance, clean, rich, sweet, but a little bit too much tutti frutti. There's so many sweet notes and a little bit artificial notes. It might sound a bit harsh. It's a nice champagne and it's definitely something that should be drank at nightclubs, etc. But not for me sitting here in comparison. Josephe Perrier, regular non-vintage. Cuvée Royale is the name since the beginning of the house. That's what they always call it. Always this yellow label, which I like. They've changed a little bit bottle shape, etc. But I will tell you that the most remarkable non-vintage experience that I can just recall is coming from bottles from the 60s from Josephe Perrier. From the same case, we don't know the base exactly, but we think it was around 64, something like that. I had a couple of bottles. Two of them started to have a huge leakage. So one of the bottles was half, and I was out running and I ran with the bottle to a friend of mine who had a dinner and just put it outside, and he said still it's the best regular non-vintage he's ever drank. The second half full bottle I opened myself, absolutely super fresh, so lemony, so green, so grassy, so exquisite and refined and very similar to vintage wines. And historically I would say that this is definitely one of the best non-vintage champagnes, but very often forgotten about. Today, before tasting, there is a huge plus. They just started with this vintage, 2018 base, which you can read on the back label. So now, from now on, I will rate every single new edition by the base vintage. And 2018 for non-vintage champagnes is a marvel, because that's such a rich, huge, rounded, warm vintage, but with style. Not like 15, which is just big, but the 18s are so perfectly balanced, but in a rich style that you can drink quite early on. So most of the non-vintage champagnes based from 18 are really beautiful. And that's the case here as well. It's approximately 1/3 of each of the famous grapes. Nice bready notes, very classic, but on top of that, a little bit more toasted notes, a little bit more yellow fruit than most of the houses. I would say the crusty side of a baguette is a top note, which is so beautiful. And the fruit, very hawthorn note, a lot of flowery notes together with that. Much higher class than the Heidsieck in this tasting. I almost got a little bit of Ruinart notes at the finish. Chocolatey, toasted, and rounded in a very nice way. Very drinkable early on, but I would love to age this one. 2018 base. Very impressive. Vintage, the 50-50 blend. Normally this time it's 54% Pinot Noir in this one. 2012, and there is a difference from what's normally made from this house in the vintage category, which I see a little bit on the nose. I'll tell you soon. Normally, these vintage wines are so balanced, so I would say in the middle of the road without being boring. They are exactly balanced and in great harmony with nothing that sticks out. They changed one thing. More and more ecological parts, which is a lot part in the big part of that wine is included in here. And it's a zero dosage for the 2012, which for me is the wrong decision actually. Intellectually interesting, but this wine will be, because it's so balanced in the way it's blended, you don't need to go that far in the style of growers. You could go a little bit more on the picking up all the classic notes, because there is a hint of vanilla, which could be enhanced by 6 grams or 7 grams of sugar. So actually when I taste these two wines next to each other, I slightly for the moment prefer the non-vintage with the 18 base, because it's perfectly balanced. This is a bigger wine. It's more potential, it's more muscles, there is better villages, but the harmony in the non-vintage is for me more drinkable from the start. And that's rare, coming from Richard Julin, or Richard Julin, as I say when I'm not speaking this strange language, from these islands outside of Europe or included in Europe, what you want. Anyway, close to France. My friends, Friday, I will turn off the camera now and I will drink them and follow them and see which will be the favorites at the end.